Have you ever wondered why some people seem to just attract money and opportunity in a really easy way over and over and over again, while others are constantly struggling and maybe working harder than they've ever worked in their lives and still only getting by? Well, in this video, I'm going to be expressing to you and teaching you the difference between having a prosperous mindset and a poverty mindset. This is based on my 15 years of experience running different types of businesses and having no money, making lots of money, losing all the money, rebuilding the money, and also building businesses with my husband, who is a provider and very entrepreneurial and definitely has the mindset of prosperity. And also, both of us have worked with very wealthy people as clients over the last 15 years, and we learned a lot from them. So I'm going to be breaking it all down for you because prosperous people live in a totally different reality than everybody else. Hi, my name is Amanda. Welcome to this channel where we talk about how to manifest what you want in life without all the extra stress, chaos, and drama that most people are accustomed to. If that's something you're interested in, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we have coming out on this channel. I've been getting a lot of requests to talk about money and relationships. Those are the two hot topics on this channel, so make sure to subscribe, and you can check out all our free resources and all the courses that we have available in the description below. One really cool place to get started for this particular video would probably be our Make Money Your Honey reset, which is a money mindset course that I've been teaching for many years, and you can find that in the description below. So let's talk about the prosperous mind versus the poverty mind. The thing number one that prosperous people understand, and I mean like true prosperity. I don't mean like they just have a bunch of money but they're miserable in every other part of their lives, because I've definitely experienced that and I've seen it in lots of other very successful people. I mean like real prosperity. I mean like there's constantly money coming in, health is good, relationships are good. It doesn't mean that there aren't problems. I will get to that because life is life and there's always going to be a little bit of chaos and a little bit of problems as everything rebalances itself all the time. But the way in which they look at problems is totally different, and I'll get to that. But overall, they have an abundant life all around. There's a big difference between how those people think versus everybody else. So the thing number one that they understand is that everything really has to do with what's going on between your two ears. Whatever you believe about yourself and money, that's what you're going to experience. And I've talked about this in my relationship videos. Whatever you believe about yourself and love, that's what you're going to experience. Same exact thing when it comes to money. When it comes to money, most people don't have very positive thoughts or empowering thoughts about money. Most people have been taught to be mediocre and not have money. Even a lot of the traditional personal finance advice that most people get, although the foundations are good and it's on very good principles, a lot of that is just made for people who are only going to make a certain amount of money their entire lives, and their mindset is like, the only money I can make is tied to this paycheck. Prosperous people understand that money can come in like 5,000 different ways all the time, in all ways, 24/7, and you don't even like realize it's just constantly coming. And I will give examples of that. But the traditional personal and finance advice that most people are given, and I say this because I spent 8 years in that industry, is even though the foundations are good, it's very limited. Prosperous people understand that there's really two ways to become wealthy. There's two. That's it, right? Either you become an entrepreneur or you become a really good investor. Those are your two options. That's literally it. You're not going to save your way to more money. You're going to invest your way to more money. And it might look like investing time and energy and capital in a business, or it might look like, investing in real estate or investing in the stock market. But it's about investment. It's about putting money to use. A prosperous person understands that money must be circulated and it must be good to put to good use. A non-prosperous person thinks that money is very limited and therefore they're just constantly trying to manage it. So that is a really important one that people have to learn, because when you use money and you circulate it, this doesn't mean go crazy and go buy a bunch of stuff you can't afford and rack up your credit cards. I know there's a lot of like delusion on the internet when it comes to that kind of stuff, but it does mean that you have to learn how to live within this circulation and learn within this flow. And people who are prosperous totally understand that money is meant to be used. And usually what that means, it doesn't necessarily go spend a bunch of money. It means go invest the money and put it to work. Another difference that prosperous people understand is that prosperous people understand, as I mentioned, money can come to you all the time in all kinds of ways. Let me give you an example. When my husband and I really started locking in on this idea that we are prosperous people, what ended up happening was we just started manifesting money like crazy. And it came in a bunch of different ways. So we'll make thousands of dollars a month in passive course sales from this YouTube channel and my husband's primary business. He opens up a new office and within 24 hours has 3 new properties under management in a country he wasn't even born in and has no roots in or no connection to. He's not Latin. He's not even Latin. Okay. we're in Mexico doing all this stuff. Another thing that happens is like when we travel, we'll constantly get like free upgrades. And we don't even have like travel credit cards or anything like that. And it's constant free upgrades, or something goes wrong. Like, for example, recently we were traveling and our flight got canceled because of a lot of the stuff going on in the Caribbean, and the whole airspace getting shut down. So our flight from Miami to Mexico got canceled. Well, at first it's like, oh my God, what a pain. Well, my husband ends up getting sick and we end up needing to push back the flight that they put us on after the cancellation, and we were able to do it for free because they had initially canceled the flight first. So prosperous people, even when it looks like things are going wrong, understand that it is happening for them, not to them. And that would be an example of that. Another thing that happens is, for example, we were at my husband's office yesterday. We've been living there the last 2 weeks while we're getting everything set up because we have an event coming up in the area the next week of me recording this. And the owner of the space that we are renting from is in town. He doesn't live here. He lives in Europe, but he was in town. He's Mexican, but lives in Europe, and he was in town. And he came to meet us because we just rented the space. And he ends up telling us, first of all, he gave us a bunch of furniture for free. Okay, he didn't even try and sell it to us. He gave it to us for free so we could furnish the place. And number two, he shows up to the office yesterday. It's like, hey, I brought this computer from Denmark. I don't need it. Do you guys just want it? I'll just give it to you. We're like, oh, yeah, we'll take a free computer. So it's stuff like that that happens all the time. Or another example is, we had a storage unit. Because we moved from the city to this area very quickly. When number one, it kind of just happened. We were following the universe. But number two, my husband saw a lot of the real estate opportunity for his business where we are now. And he's like, let's go. So we went and we had to move very quickly. So we had a bunch of stuff in storage for months. And it was stuff that we had tried to sell, but we just didn't really have the time to really sell it while we were in the city. Well, suddenly in a week, it all starts to sell. So we sell a mattress, we sell a generator, we sell some other piece of furniture. And then on top of that, a lot of the stuff that we had in there, we ended up using for my husband's new office space. So we ended up not having to spend very much money at all. So again, that's all forms of abundance. We get gifts from people. That's a form of abundance. And then, of course, we make literal money through our businesses. Now, here's another thing that wealthy people know how to do. This is probably going to be a long one. Y'all should probably go get a tea or a water or a coffee at this point. But another thing is that wealthy people know how to put themselves in position. Prime example. My husband saw this area growing very quickly, and he says, we're going to rent out office space. And the office is like 5 minutes from our house. It's absolutely perfect. We can walk to it. So we rent out the office space, and he's like, it's basically there's only like one main highway that goes through all the towns on the lake. And it's in an area that's growing very rapidly. So there's a ton of like cars that pass by it all the time. There's a ton of foot traffic already in the plaza. Of course, he has all his online and YouTube and all that stuff already cranking and roaring for him. And now he's like, I'm going to put myself in a physical position to attract business. So he's not going out chasing it or anything like that. He just put himself where the people are. He put himself where his potential clients are. By the way, the same thing works for those of you who are dating. If you want a high performing man, if you want an ambitious man, if you want a masculine man, go hang out where they hang out. So, right? So it's putting yourself in position rather than going to go chase. My husband's office is a prime example of that. Within a week, there were 3 new properties under management, 2 new real estate listings, and a new immigration client, and the office isn't even ready yet, all because he put himself in position. Another example, also learned this one I've learned a lot from my husband, actually, when it comes to this stuff. He's brain is like just like constantly working on this stuff. Another one that I learned from my husband, move before it's too late. And I'm going to use my husband's business as an example for this kind of stuff because it's relevant. So, for example, we moved to this area. We did not go to the expat hotspot of Lake Chapala, Mexico, which are Chapala and Ajijic, which are 2 towns in the area. We went further west. Number 1, it was a better deal. Number 2, there's a lot more opportunity for real estate. And number 3, as soon as my husband saw it, we're 20 minutes from Ajijic. As soon as my husband saw it, he's like, oh, the expansion and the growth is moving this way. They just put in a pharmacy. They just put in an OXXO. OXXO's like 7-Eleven in Mexico. They just put in a Walmart. They just opened it. Like, we're going in. That's what we're doing. This is where the growth is coming because those companies spend millions upon millions of dollars to learn where to open stuff, and they just opened in an area that isn't as developed yet or as well known yet as the other areas on the lake. And guess what starts to happen? That expansion has started moving west. So a lot of people who are very prosperous, they move before everything's perfect. In fact, they know that if everything's perfect, and a lot of people have gotten to it already, that's a bad sign. They try to get in early on stuff. And when my husband noticed, oh, Walmart got in early on this land, the pharmacy got in early on this land, the OXXO got in early on this land, that's when my husband said, I'm going to get in early too. We're getting office space and we're going to make this the center of operations for now until we decide, what next country we're going to and all that kind of stuff. Prosperous people don't think just one step ahead. They don't think, oh my God, what am I going to do this month? They're thinking 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the line. And they're making decisions based on that place. So that is a huge difference as well. Another one, prosperous people are not cheap. They're not cheap with themselves and they're not cheap with others. However, they are resourceful. So this is one of those that requires a lot of nuance in how I talk about this, and I've got some examples to point it out. So let's talk about not being cheap. I saw my husband negotiate a deal for like 3 hours the other day. My husband likes to negotiate for sport. He really enjoys the game of negotiation. He's always trying to find a win-win. He's always learning how to get better at it. It's quite fascinating. Like, I was there, we were with another couple. It was our husbands who were in the negotiation, and the wife and I were like this, like we're watching a tennis match, and we're just like taking notes and like trying to learn, watching our husbands do this because they're very similar in how they think. But there is one area in which they were very different. The man that my husband was negotiating with was very cheap. My husband is not cheap. So here's how the negotiation went down. What happened was that guy, they were trying to go in on a real estate deal together, and that guy tries to put all of the risk of the deal on my husband because that guy doesn't want to spend any money, and that guy is cheap. And that guy's like, oh, but I've already spent this money because he's coming from a place of lack. When you're cheap, you're coming from a place of lack. And what ends up happening is you end up costing yourself opportunities. So my husband could have turned this real estate deal completely all the way around in 30 to 60 days. It was for Airbnb management. 30 to 60 days, he could have turned the whole thing around for this person. But this person was only thinking about, oh my God, this is a little bit that I have. I've already spent this much. I'm only willing to pay this much. And the numbers just did not work out for either of them. And it turned out fine. And one of the differences between men and women is when men go into negotiations and it just doesn't work out, no harm, no foul. Women get all emotional about it. I'm sorry. It's the truth. It is what it is. It's one of the things that we can learn from men when it comes to business. where women make up a bunch of stories in their heads about it or whatever. The men are like, okay, whatever, the deal didn't work. Shake hands, move on. Maybe the next deal will work, right? I mean, they can even go into like super tense moments and then they're fine after we're in a negotiation. And I've seen a lot of high performing men in those types of situations, and these were two high performing men. So because that guy that my husband was negotiating with was cheap and had been cheap for such a long time, he was having massive problems in his business. So for example, he would hire people, but he would hire to pay them the least amount of money possible. So that of course, all of those people have no incentive to actually do a good job, and they were completely ruining his real estate business. That's what happens when you are cheap. My husband's the opposite. Now, my husband's not going to necessarily overpay. My husband simply looks for value for value. There's a difference between I'm going to look for value and I'm going to do a fair exchange of value versus being cheap because I'm trying to spend as little bit of money as possible. The first one will make you prosperous. The second one is going to be a huge pain in the ass, and it's going to ruin your business and it's going to ruin your finances because, again, you are coming from a place of lack, and it just does not work. And that's literally an example I saw recently watching my husband negotiate with a guy for 3 hours. I'm taking notes. Another way which this shows up, and this goes back to the traditional personal finance advice, I'm sure you've heard this: don't buy the lattes. Don't buy the lattes, don't buy the avocado toast, don't spend any money, make your own coffee, whatever. So we have a coffee shop, right down the mountain in the plaza where we have our office. If we had followed the advice of don't buy lattes and make your own coffee, we would not have the office space that we have now, which is an incredible story, and we wouldn't have had $30,000 in new business in 24 hours. It wouldn't have happened. Let me explain. Maybe if we had stopped buying lattes, we would have saved $2,400 a year, but we would have missed out on tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in opportunity. Here's how that works. We would go to this coffee shop multiple times a week. He would get a latte, I would get a matcha, we would have lunch there, and we got to know the owner of the coffee shop. Turns out the owner manages a lot of the offices and properties in the plaza. My husband, when we first got to this place in the plaza, there was like nothing in the plaza. There was like 2 businesses there. Within 6 months, my husband saw how more businesses started renting space in the plaza, and my husband said, ding, 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 I need to do that. That's a good sign before they run out of spaces. Well, he goes to the owner of the coffee shop, who he is now friends with, and says, hey, how can I rent this one over there? Well, the guy talked to the owner, he cut the deal, he did the whole lease, he even co-signed for my husband, which is a big deal because we're foreigners in this country, so you need a co-signer and a guarantor. It's like a whole effing thing. And that guy co-signed for my husband on the lease, and then he negotiated a bunch of stuff for us so that it wouldn't cost a ton of money, and then in addition to that, immediately started sending new business our way. We've done business and we've spent money with all the other businesses in the plaza. So what happens? They all send freaking business our way. Now, we didn't go to their businesses to spend money with the intention of like, oh, this is going to be a tit for tat. I'm going to give you money. You're going to send me money. We actually needed the stuff in the stores. But because we circulated the money, going back to that circulation concept I was talking about earlier, and we built these relationships and we were doing exchanges of business when we needed those guys in order to get an office space. They were there, and we have great office neighbors. They're fantastic, and they've been consistently sending business our way. So had we followed the traditional advice of don't buy lattes, don't spend your money, make all your coffee at home, don't spend anything, be cheap, be a miser, be frugal, we would not have the opportunity that we have now. We would have saved, like I said, $2,000 if we went nuts with the lattes, in comparison to having invested that, built relationships, and having massive opportunity that far outweighs the $2,400 we would have saved over the course of a year. So it's important to realize, right, that investment and spending are not the same thing. Now let me talk about resourcefulness, because I talked about don't be cheap, because it doesn't work at all in life. Money doesn't work that way. But at the same time, you have to be respectful of money, and wealthy people and people who are prosperous are very resourceful. I'm going to use my husband as an example again because, again, he's just better at this than I am, and I've learned a lot from him. My husband's very resourceful. So part of what my husband has to do, part of our business, we do immigration, we do property management for foreigners trying to come to Mexico, and investors. We do property management for a lot of the properties in this area, which is one of the most highly searched areas in Mexico, and we do real estate. It's like a full service, like you want to move here and you need short-term housing, and then you want to buy, basically. And right now, my husband he has to work with a lot of contractors for this stuff, right? Like we have to work with contractors for the immigration cases. We have to work with contractors. Sometimes the properties that he manages, like they need a fix or something, we need to get the property ready in order to put it on Airbnb or VRBO or whatever it is. And now in the office, my husband needs some contractors to do some work in the office to get it to where we need to get it, because we're trying to build a studio in there so he can just go down there and film and have everything ready, and then possibly rent it out to other creators in the area who need studio space. So my husband talks to these contractors all the time, and my husband can tell when the contractor is way overcharging him versus one who's actually being fair. And really, what it comes down to is when you're resourceful, it's about being fair. And that's part of the reason why so many people in the area love to work with my husband for the property management, because he knows how to tell when contractors are effing him, right? And you'll negotiate, or trying to F his clients, right? And he will negotiate with them at the same time, right? So that's a part of it, is just finding the fairness. It's finding like what is the actual value here, and is it a fair exchange of value? At the same time, he's not going to spend money for no reason. So for example, the furniture in the office, we got a lot of it for free because we're prosperous people and the owner agreed to it. We just got a free computer from the owner that he offered to us. And the other furniture that we needed in there for like the studio area and the studio space, we bought it secondhand. And a lot of the stuff we already had, like I said, in storage. So the stuff that we didn't sell, we could actually use in the office. So money is this very interesting balance of like, you can't be too attached to it, and you can't be cheap, and you can't be, tacaño or terco, camina por lo codo, as we say in Spanish, right? Cheap, as you say in English. And at the same time, you still have to be respectful of it, and being resourceful and being smart and knowing what a fair exchange of value is, and not spending for no reason is also it's a way of respecting money. So it's not an either or, it's actually a both and really at the end of the day, it just comes down to that middle ground, right? Where you're not just, oh, I'm gonna like hoard all my money and be cheap and all that kind of stuff, and at the same time you're not out there, spending yourself into oblivion and all that kind of stuff, and getting yourself up to your eyeballs in debt and all of those kinds of things. The other thing we've learned, and I actually learned this from one of my husband's friends. This was an insane conversation I heard between the two of them. This is a guy my husband's known for many, many years. My husband's from the Bay Area, so he knows a lot of tech bros. He grew up around a lot of them. And he knows quite a few. And we were talking to this guy that my husband knew from many, many years ago. They were just catching up. And this guy just very casually says, yeah, I had this business and it didn't work out. We lost about $30 million and we had to start over. That man said so nonchalantly, yeah, we just lost $30 million. Like, it's no big deal. And I was like, $30 million? Like, I would die if I lost $30 million. And the guy was like, whatever, and he just like moved on with his life. So one of the things I've seen from prosperous people is like, they just don't make money a big deal. Whether they make it, whether they lose it, whether an investment works, whether it doesn't work, you're going to have wins, you're going to have losses. Like, none of it is really that big of a deal. And they don't use their emotions when it comes to making a lot of these financial decisions or thinking about their past financial mistakes, there's not a whole lot of emotion there. Or moving into future decisions, again, there's just not a whole lot of emotion there when it comes to money. And for most people, the average person, money is a very emotionally charged topic. So a lot of these people have learned to become very regulated in their nervous systems when it comes to money. They don't make a failure mean anything about them personally. The really prosperous ones, they don't mean make money mean more than it actually is. They're like, money's important, but it's not like the most important thing in the world. And I could have it today and I could not have it tomorrow, and I'll be fine either way. So they're very regulated and they have more of a healthy relationship with it, and they're not so emotional when it comes to money. That was a huge one that I listened in on that conversation. I was like shocked when I heard that come out of that guy's mouth. The other thing that you want to know is this is a long one, like I said, is like problems are your friend. So a lot of people, what they try to do is they try to avoid problems. I want to avoid problems. I want to manage the problems. And wealthy people, what they do is they basically intentionally seek out problems. Then they create the solution for the problem, and then they get paid because they're providing the solution for the problem. They're like, bring it on, bring the problems on. I'm going to fix the problems and I'm going to get paid to fix the problems. I see this in my husband all the time. I see it with a lot of the people that he manages properties for. I see it with a lot of the wealthy clients that we've worked with over the years. They have no issue with problems whatsoever. Again, they're just like more regulated about it than the average person, because they, for example, we hear this all the time for my husband's business. People will travel over here to Mexico or lots of other countries. It happens here, but we'll hear it in Mexico and they'll be like, oh, okay, so there's an efficiency problem with this type of business over here. Why don't we go fix that problem? And then boom, that person ends up making money. Or for example, with my husband, he's like, oh my gosh, there's so many people out here in this particular area, Mexicans who don't live in this area. They basically built all these vacation homes for their families. Their families are never out here. They never have time. And the houses are sitting here literally doing nothing for them. And they don't want to deal with the problems of short-term rentals and that stuff. Why don't I do the short-term rentals? Why don't I present this solution to the owners of these properties? And then boom, they fork over 40% to my husband happily, because they don't have to deal with any of the problems. My husband deals with it. He has his systems to do it really well, and they just get their money every month, right? So that would be an example. My husband saw a problem, and this is what wealthy people do. They see problems, and they see problems as opportunities to make money. The average person sees problems and tries to avoid problems. That's what they do. The other final thing, right, is, and the average person spends most of their time, and this goes back to the being cheap and resourceful and all that stuff. The average person spends most of their time trying to manage money rather than trying to make more money. Part of the reason why, by the way, is because they have it in their heads, which goes back to what's between your two ears. They have it in their heads that in order for them to make more money, they need to work harder. That is a total myth. I could do a whole other freaking video on that. This YouTube channel, my husband's YouTube channel, my husband's business, it makes us money in our sleep a lot of the time. A lot of that has to do with systems and having put the work up front, so that things just run 24/7 without us constantly needing to hustle. A lot of that has to do with what kind of a business you get into, what kind of a business model you get into. But one of the main things people need to do, and wealthy people understand this and prosperous people understand this, is that you have to divorce the idea that more money equals more work, because it's just unequivocally false. It's unequivocally false. I can give you 5,000 examples, but the average person thinks that in order to make more money, then they have to work harder. So and they don't want to do that because they're like, I don't want to run myself into the ground. I don't want to be Elon Musk working 100 hours a week. I don't blame you. I don't either. But Elon has a different brain than a lot of us. So what happens is most people end up spending all, and they also believe, most people, that money's very limited. They believe it's a limited resource in their lives. So what happens is they spend like 95% of their time managing money, and 5% of their time making money. Whereas prosperous people spend 95% of their time making money and 5% of their time managing the money. That's the difference. And when I understood that in my previous business all those years ago, and this was before my nervous system broke down and all that stuff because I didn't understand a lot of the other things that I talked about in this video, it changed my entire freaking life when I realized that prosperous people just spend most of their time making more money rather than managing it. And most people have it backwards. They're spending most of their time managing their money and thinking that it's a limited resource, or they're not smart enough, or they have to work harder. And again, all comes back to what the first thing I said, that everything when it comes to money, when it comes to love, when it comes to literally anything, has to do with what's going on between your two ears and what it is that you actually believe about money and yourself. I'm going to end it here. We'll be here forever. If you guys want more stuff about money, have any other questions, please let me know in the comments. I love talking about money and relationships. I will be doing more content on, for example, how to talk to your spouse when you have different financial personalities and all that kind of stuff, because that's very useful information to know when it comes to communicating with your partner. So that's upcoming. Make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell. Make sure to check out all our free resources below so you can join our email list, and you can also check out some of our paid programs that are available to help you with a lot of these topics as well. It's all categorized in the description, so you can just pick and choose what it is that you need in that moment. Thank you so much for giving me your time today, and I will catch you on the next one.